Welcome back to Lost Touch channel. My name is Anton Bieltsin. I'm a criminal defense attorney in the Southern District of California here in San Diego. You're now watching the 8th video in a multi-part series dealing with conspiracy law. In the first video, I gave you an overview and a roadmap where we're headed. Since then, we've covered a bunch of different topics dealing with conspiracies. And now we're on to defenses. In this video, we're discussing buyer-seller relationship as a defense to a conspiracy charge. In fact, some courts don't think of this as a defense, but rather prosecution's failure to prove an agreement between two or more people to commit a crime. It is one thing to commit a crime, and it is another to conspire with others to commit the underlying crime. Let me explain after this. Thank you for joining me once again in discussing conspiracy law. In this video, we're going to focus on the buyer-seller relationship as a defense to a conspiracy charge. We're going to talk about one case, United States versus Loveland, a 2016 case from the 9th Circuit. And here's what happened. 12 individuals were charged with a conspiracy to distribute methamphetamine. Now, some of those people were also charged with an underlying offense, meaning the distribution itself, but not Mr. Loveland. He was only charged with a conspiracy to distribute methamphetamine, not with the distribution itself. Now, to a layperson, it may seem that a conspiracy is a less serious charge, because after all, we're only talking about agreements. But every attorney knows that a conspiracy to distribute narcotics is more serious than the distribution itself, because the prosecution gets a bunch of advantages by charging somebody with a conspiracy. The case becomes bigger. With more co-conspirators, that means some of those people might turn against you. They will cooperate, they will help the government, or they may testify at trial against you, meaning that you have less chance of winning a trial. And of course, from this series, you've learned that having co-conspirators, you might be liable and responsible for your co-conspirators' crimes. Again, making the charge more serious. In this case, he's only charged with a conspiracy, not the distribution itself. And of course, like I just mentioned, his co-conspirators testify against Mr. Loveland at trial, and they say that there were about 12 to 20 deliveries. There were sales of 2 ounces each, at about $2,400, meaning that this group of individuals would sell the narcotics to Mr. Loveland, and he would later resell those narcotics. We know that the quantities were too large for personal consumption, meaning that we know that Loveland was most likely reselling the drugs, not using them himself. Now, some of those co-conspirators testified that they were receiving discounts, or some of them testified that the drugs were fronted to them, meaning that the drugs were given him for free, and later when the sale is made down the line, that co-conspirator would give the money back up the chain. But with Loveland, we know that there were no discounts, no credits, and no agreement where the drugs would go. So Loveland would be purchasing these drugs at a full price, and there was no negotiations or agreements about the further resales. Now, the district court and the jury found Loveland guilty of a conspiracy to distribute methamphetamine. He received a mandatory life sentence because he had 2 prior felony convictions for drug offenses. Now that we're in the appellate court, in the 9th Circuit, the 9th Circuit reverses the jury and reverses the district court's decision. Because here's what we need to remember. A conspiracy means an agreement to commit a crime, not the commission of the crime itself. There was no doubt, no questions about the fact that Loveland was distributing narcotics. But we need to see an agreement between him and the higher-ups, the people he was purchasing the drugs from. Otherwise, he's simply selling the narcotics. An agreement can be explicit or tacit, and it can be proven with direct or circumstantial evidence. Here's how we prove this agreement. Evidence of a prolonged and actively pursued course of sales coupled with seller's knowledge and a shared stake in buyer's illegal venture, meaning that whoever Loveland was buying from, that person has to be interested in Loveland's success. There must be an agreement between Loveland and that seller. Otherwise, Loveland simply becomes a middleman. He has his own venture. Think about it on a non-illegal purpose. For example, if you have a franchise, the company that owns the whole franchise is interested in those franchisees' profits, right? And if there's that profit, there's that agreement between those two people. But if the restaurant purchases product from a warehouse, well, there is no agreement. They're simply having their own business and they're buying from a different business. Simply a buyer-seller relationship. How do we know, or how can we show this agreement when we're talking about illegal sales? Well, cooperation and a coded warning system between the seller and Loveland. Or the numbers, the quantities, and frequency of the purchasing. How much was he buying and how often? And like we had with other co-conspirators, fronting or co-assignment of the drugs. Distribution is a different crime from a conspiracy to distribute. We know that. I've said that multiple times in this video. The distribution itself is different from a conspiracy to distribute. And here's what the Ninth Circuit says about Loveland. Sanchez Group, the people who were selling the drugs to Loveland, might assume that Loveland was reselling the methamphetamine, their product. He could have also been flushing it down the toilet for all they cared, since they already had their money. This is simply a buyer-seller relationship. Sanchez's group doesn't care about Loveland's success. And in fact, what about the future sales? Don't you have a question whether Sanchez is interested in having more sales, more profit coming in? Well, we know that with future sales, Loveland was not tied to Sanchez. He was free to make his own purchases. So he could have went to somebody else for a better price or better product. This is simply a buyer-seller relationship. So the Ninth Circuit says that Loveland is not guilty of conspiracy to distribute narcotics because we don't see any agreement between him and Sanchez. But again, he is guilty of the distribution itself. But wait a second, like I said earlier, he was never charged with it. So the Ninth Circuit says there's insufficient evidence to hold Loveland responsible for the conspiracy. So they reverse the district court. I hope you now understand a little bit more about how conspiracies work. And like I said in the introduction, in this video, we focused on that agreement. Conspiracy is an agreement to commit the underlying offense. If you enjoyed this video, please click like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button, so next time I post, you'll be first to know. Thanks for watching.